Game genres need to serve two purposes, one for consumers and one for creators. Consumers use game genres to figure out their preferences. When you find a game you like, knowing what genre it belongs to allows you to find other games with similar features or mechanics. Creators use game genres for research. After you decide what kind of game you want to make, looking at how other games in that genre solved a certain design challenge can save you from trying to reinvent the wheel. Most game genres do both of these things fairly well, but out of the ones that don't, the most criminal offender is the RPG. And the reason why RPGs are such a gigantic problem is because nobody can tell me what that term even means. That's surprising to me because RPG elements have found their way into every other game genre out there, to the point where it feels like AAA games can't even get approved for release unless they have mechanics that revolve around levels, stats, or color-coded loot drops. As RPG elements become more common, the line between what is and isn't a role-playing game will start to get more and more blurry. And if design trends continue the way they have been, there's a possibility that the entire genre could become a dying art form. That's why I think we need a definition for what an RPG is, to eliminate any ambiguity, and also to give the genre itself an alternate skill tree that could one day lead to a style of game that the world has never seen before. If you think that sounds crazy, you're absolutely right. But you wouldn't have clicked on this video if you weren't into long-winded adventures with a heavy amount of dialogue, am I right? And hey, this dungeon ain't gonna rate itself, so if you're in, roll for initiative. I want to explain why it's so important that we have a definition for RPGs, but if you just want to power level straight to the final boss, skip to this timestamp. Obviously, RPG stands for role-playing game, and role-playing is hyphenated, don't forget that. But what exactly is a role-playing game? I've been asking people that for the past 10 years. No joke, 10 years. And the number of people who actually gave insightful answers can be counted on one hand. But most of the time when I ask this question, someone, without fail, will confidently proclaim that a role-playing game is just any game where you play the role of a character. Then they'll look at me like I'm the stupid one for asking. Look, genres exist for a reason. If every game is an RPG, then none of them are. So if Sonic the Hedgehog is an RPG just because you play the role of that character, we're officially doomed as a species. I shouldn't have had to explain that, but the video game industry has done a terrible job of educating its consumers. And that's by design. You think publishers want to deal with knowledgeable customers? No! They want people to be ignorant and agreeable, so they can keep taking away your right to own the games you pay for. Knowing more about game genres helps you figure out exactly what kind of gameplay mechanics appeal to you, and that allows you to make more informed decisions about the games you buy. To get the most out of this information though, you really have to be interested in how games are made. That doesn't necessarily mean you want to actually make games as a profession or a hobby, it could just mean that you're curious about the process, like how someone can think airplanes are cool without actually wanting to become a pilot. Without a proper definition, it's been extremely difficult for RPGs to evolve as a genre. When innovation does occur, it often happens slowly and haphazardly. And the reason for that is because the only way we know how to make RPGs is by borrowing concepts from other RPGs. In other words, every RPG you've ever played is just a combination of ideas from some of the RPGs that the designer played. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but so far, the best idea we've had to make RPGs better has been to combine them with other genres. The problem is that approaching the genre with that mindset can lead to situations where someone puts a bunch of stats in a game that doesn't need it. All because they misguidedly think that people only play RPGs to watch numbers get bigger. I call this method of doing things designing by accident. For a lot of people, this is what's fun about making games. You're figuring it out as you go, flying by the seat of your pants. It's indie, it's punk rock, it's guerrilla-style game making. And that's badass, no doubt about it. But not everybody operates like that. Some people need a little more structure in their lives. Don't get me wrong, I like watching numbers get bigger more than anybody, and designing by accident has led to some incredible games. But for every successful game that was designed accidentally, there are dozens upon dozens of failures. If developers keep trying to make RPGs better by mixing them with other kinds of games, RPGs could start to lose their identity, essentially turning the entire genre into an endangered species. Yeah, that might be an exaggeration, but the point still stands. Instead of designing RPGs by accident like we have in the past, I'm hoping that a definition will give the next generation of game makers the ability to design on purpose. Now, you would think that if anybody knows what an RPG is, it would be the people who actually make them, right? Well, That's not really clear. To understand why, we gotta take a trip back in time. But don't drag your feet. The portal's only gonna stay open until the end of my next turn. So, all RPGs, both in the East and the West, trace their lineage back to Dungeons & Dragons. First released in 1974, D&D began as a collaboration between Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, two guys from the wargaming scene of the Midwest. The war games of the 20th century had evolved from games that were designed as military training simulations, and that's why the settings of civilian games revolved around the military conflicts of the time. But it didn't take long before war games were adapted for medieval settings. In 1954, 20 years before D&D First Edition, Fellowship of the Ring hit bookstores, single-handedly changing a generation of normal, well-adjusted people into ravenous, bloodthirsty nerds. Naturally, the tabletop scene wasn't immune to Tolkien's influence. By the late 1960s, medieval war games began to incorporate fantasy elements. One of these games lifted concepts directly from The Lord of the Rings and went on to become the wildly popular Warhammer franchise. In 1971, Dave Arneson started developing his own fantasy world that he called Blackmoor. He started with Gary Gygax's medieval wargame Chainmail as a base and threw in some of his own ideas. These ideas included hit points, experience, leveling, pretty much all the mechanics that people associate with RPGs. When people got a hold of Dungeons & Dragons, the first thing that computer-savvy players did was turn it into video games. When D&D found its way to Japan, programmers there did the exact same thing. So originally, and I can't stress this enough, all the RPGs that were made using a computer were just digital recreations of tabletop RPGs. In 1985, Yuji Horii noticed that RPGs were too complicated to have mass market appeal, so he decided to make a game with simplified mechanics that was designed to reach a broader audience. A year later, his team released Dragon Quest, a combination of Ultima and wizardry with a visual novel spin on things. Over at Squaresoft, Hironobu Sakaguchi had been trying to get an RPG off the ground, but he didn't get the green light until his bosses saw how successful Dragon Quest was. The result was Final Fantasy, a game that was also inspired by Ultima and wizardry. And thus the JRPG was born, a simplified take on digital recreations of Western tabletop games. In other words, JRPGs are a subgenre of Western RPGs.
What did he say?
A lot of people think that Western RPGs and JRPGs should be classified as two completely different genres, and I get that, because, gross. But even though the two are polar opposites tonally, mechanically speaking, the two share a common ancestor in Dungeons & Dragons. Again, all RPGs are descended from D&D, and that goes double for other tabletop RPGs. So in my epic quest to understand what an RPG was, the tabletop space was the first place I looked. And a lot of the rulebooks I was able to get my hands on conveniently had a section in the beginning called What is a Role-Playing Game? And every single one was useless, because they only explain what you do in an RPG. And that's cool if that's all you're looking for, but as a designer, knowing what players do is nowhere near as interesting as knowing why they do them. Understanding the reasons why people play certain games over others has gigantic ramifications when it comes to building an audience. And knowing exactly what mechanics your audience likes allows you to enhance those aspects of your games. Then that will convert members of your audience into dedicated fans. It's a positive feedback loop, just like the dopamine hit you get from a level up. Alright, we're approaching the Overlord's castle. Before we storm the gates, make sure to equip any items that boost your intelligence, because things are about to get analytical. Let's recap why it's important for role-playing games to have a definition. For one, we need a definition to eliminate any ambiguity between what is and isn't an RPG. This will preserve the concept of the RPG and prevent it from being lost to time. A definition would also help designers explore new ways to make RPGs by designing them on purpose, instead of smashing together mechanics from other games. We're also going to need to lay down some ground rules to keep things from getting out of hand. Just like all other game genres, the definition can only refer to gameplay mechanics. The graphical style and narrative themes can't have anything to do with it. The definition also has to be universal. In other words, there can't be any distinction between Western-style RPGs and JRPGs. Since JRPGs have always been a subgenre of Western RPGs, the definition has to apply to both of them. And since role-playing video games are just computerized versions of pen and paper games, the definition also has to apply to tabletop RPGs. However, the definition of RPG does have to be separate from action RPGs. That could be a really interesting discussion, but it's gonna have to wait for another time. So, what is an RPG? It's a game where the skills of the player progress independently from the skills of their character. That's it. That's the definition. With any game, the more you play, the better you get. But in an RPG, no matter how many rules you have memorized, that skill doesn't equate to your character's abilities. Nothing that you can do in real life can affect what they can do in the game. That's what the stats are for. They're a way of visualizing how good your character is at something. Over time, the numbers get bigger, but that has nothing to do with how good you've become at the game. See, the dice and stats force you to play the role of your character. For example, let's say, hypothetically, you're Usain Bolt, and you take a quest to win the 100-meter dash. In real life, you'd have a good chance of winning that event. But if you were role-playing as Stephen Hawking, don't even bother rolling the dice. Quest failed. When you try to gain an advantage by employing skills and techniques that your character couldn't possibly know, it's called metagaming, a practice that's frowned upon in most role-playing circles, because when you do that, suddenly you're playing as yourself instead of your character. Wait, hold up. Something about this ain't right. If the rules of an RPG are set up so that your skills can't affect the skills of your character, that doesn't sound like a game at all. How do you play a game that you're literally not allowed to play? Is that why more and more elements from action games are finding their way into RPGs? It's almost like developers know that people don't play RPGs for their gameplay, or lack thereof for that matter. A while back, my crew and I were playtesting a rule set that I was working on. The idea was that they'd be assigned a character and placed in a random combat scenario, and the point was to solve that encounter like a puzzle. All of us were really excited about the concept, but when we sat down to actually play it, we were all bored out of our minds. But that wound up being some really valuable data. After that session, I realized that without the connection that players have to the world and their characters, people have no reason to play RPGs at all. It's the story, not the gameplay, that draws people to the genre. So it's no surprise that so many tabletop rulebooks describe RPGs as an interactive storytelling experience. Well, I think I'm gonna have to abandon this quest, because it's starting to look like this whole thing was pointless from the start. Maybe an RPG really is just an interactive story where you play the role of a character. And when you think about it, all games are basically crunching the same numbers behind the scenes. Just kidding, that's something only an idiot would say. Here's what's really going on. In the 10 years I've spent studying and analyzing RPGs, there was one crucial detail that I completely ignored, and that's because the genre has been such an essential pillar of video games for so long that it feels like they've always been there. It reminds me of a creation myth in a lot of ways.
In the beginning, there was nothing, and then God said, "Let there be dice."
Then a bunch of teenagers killed God with the power of friendship. But then I remembered something. He started with Gary Gygax's medieval wargame Chainmail as a base and threw in some of his own ideas. The answer had been staring me in the face the entire time. RPGs are a subgenre of wargames, which is a subgenre of strategy games, which is a subgenre of what? Chess? Point is, RPGs are in fact strategy games. And when I realized that, it was like the game design equivalent of finding the missing link in human evolution, or discovering the lost city of Atlantis. It recontextualized everything I thought I knew about the genre. Because even though the history of RPGs has been laid bare for everyone to see, RPGs aren't thought of as strategy games, and they sure as hell aren't designed like strategy games. I would argue that the way RPGs are made, strategic gameplay emerges as a byproduct of the mechanics, which isn't the same as designing a game with strategy in mind from the start. When designers do have strategy in mind when making an RPG, the result is a tactical RPG. An alternate name for tactical RPG is strategy RPG, and to me that's definitive proof that we've all forgotten the strategic origins of the genre. It's like saying ATM machine, or pin number, or action platformer. Another funny thing about tactical RPGs is that a lot of people consider them to be a subgenre of JRPGs. And remember, a JRPG is just a regular RPG with a lot of the complexity stripped out. So then a tactical RPG puts some of that complexity back into the JRPG, but those games still don't have you making anywhere near the number of choices and decisions as a standard RPG. And I think that is the essence of the genre: choices and decisions. 20 years ago, Fable summarized it pretty concisely.
Fable. For every choice, a consequence.
So I'm definitely going to have to revise my definition. An RPG is a strategy game where the player's skill progresses independently from their characters. And I guarantee you that definition will be revised again at some point in the future. In a way, it's less of a definition and more of a scientific theory. And what's the definition of a theory? It's an attempt to explain something using all the evidence you have up to that point, but you're open to the possibility that there might one day be new evidence that makes that explanation useless. That's why gravity is just a theory. So if you think my definition needs another update, present your evidence in the comments. Or, if you have your own definition that's completely different from mine, you can share that too. Someone might read it. You never know. Anyway, for making it this far in the video, you have all been promoted to level 2, giving you the ability to cast subscription of fortuitousness on this channel. Hey, you earned it. We may not have defeated the evil overlord of the castle, but that's because the RPG iceberg goes deep enough to make hell freeze over. Twice. So we've barely even scratched the surface of this questline, but I'm still really excited about the new developments that this research might lead to. If I could go back in time and change the name of the genre without causing a rift in the time-space continuum, I definitely want to reference the fact that RPGs are a subgenre of strategy games. That being said though, role-playing might be the best way to describe the phenomenon of your skills progressing separately from your characters. So you can do whatever you want, but I am going to start calling it role-playing strategy. Knowing what I know now, I wonder if stats and levels are the best possible way to simulate the separation between player and character skill. That's why I'm hoping that this video encourages people to try and make an RPG without stats and levels. There's a chance that the results of those experiments would fall into completely different genres, and that would mean that stats and levels are the only way to make an RPG. It's probably going to be decades before anything happens on that front though, so in the meantime, I'm going to continue to pick game genres apart pixel by pixel. Next up on the chopping block, fighting games. So if you don't want to miss it, make sure to light punch, forward, light kick, hard punch that notification bell. Thanks for joining me on this quest, and an even bigger thanks goes out to the Afterlifers who support us on Patreon.